there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free book review for Trick by Natalie Jaster. But before we go ahead and get on into the review, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, and sometimes other days throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box below for links to my Patreon, where you can be entered into winning book giveaways, my Buddy Read Discord, and my Amazon shop, where I list all of my favorite books that I talk about on my channel. Trick by Natalie Jaster is an adult fantasy romance. It is the first book that I've ever read by this author, and it's the first book in her series, Dark Seasons, Foolish Kingdoms. I'm going to go through a brief summary of this book, then talk about things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and then I'm going to give the book an overall rating. Trick follows two different characters' points of view. The first one is Poet, and Poet's the one that tells most of the story. So he is a court jester, but he's a little bit different than what you think of a traditional jester would be. He's incredibly talented, but in multiple ways. So obviously you have like his talents with acrobatics and showmanship, but he actually is very charismatic and he's very good with speaking. So he has good like poetry skills and being able to think on his feet and be clever with his words. And he's also like gorgeous. Every single woman and man in this kingdom wants to be with Poet because he is absolutely gorgeous and he's just so talented. And because of all his talents, Poet has wormed his way into the king and queen's good graces, and they see him as someone who can influence them, give advice, mentor them. So he has worked for years to get himself into this position to have political influence over the king and queen, and he has a reason for doing this. One thing about this world is each kingdom is actually related to a different season, and the season in that kingdom does not change. So Poet is from spring, and spring is known to be like, I want to say almost like the party kingdom. Everybody, you know, engages in debauchery. I mean, not like to an extent where they're not able to function on a normal day-to-day basis, but they throw like lavish parties and they're very like sexual beings and all of that. They just like to have fun. And then we're following the princess from Autumn, whose name is Briar. She and her mother, the queen, are making their way to spring because they hold these annual peace talks there. So it's like a political thing. So all of the kings and queens from the different seasons are coming to spring, and they stay for a month. And Briar is known as being like very uptight, and she has kind of a reputation of just being kind of boring and prudent and just not a lot of fun. And the reason that she's like this is that her father died when she was younger, and she kind of blames herself for what happened to him. So because of that, she has become very withdrawn and reserved, even though she didn't always used to be like that. And that's kind of an important part to the story. Other than each kingdom having a different season, there's really no magic or any other fantastical elements in this story. So this is definitely an enemies to lovers story. So Poet really does not like royals at all because he thinks that they exploit people, and I'm going to go into that. So he targets different royals, not the king and queens, but like noblemen and women for ridicule. So he ends up targeting Briar because he sees how uptight she is and thinks it would be funny to target her. And that kind of starts off their interactions as Poet comes after her to ridicule her, and they end up just crossing each other's paths. As Poet and Briar develop a relationship, we learn more about this world. So one key element in this world is those citizens that are born with a mental handicap or a mental disability. This is a big theme in the story and mostly what the plot revolves around. So these people are actually, when it's discovered that they have a mental handicap or disability, they are taken by the crown away from their families, and they are put to use where they will be best used. And it could be a multitude of things. It could be something as putting them in a freak show so that people can laugh at them. It could be putting them in a ring to fight other disabled people just for entertainment, a lot of cruel things like that. Or it could be just to put them in a field to plow a field if that's all they're able to do. So anybody in this world that is born with a mental disability is treated badly, very badly, taken away from their families and treated without compassion, without empathy, without kindness, and they are basically considered less than human. And Poet is very passionate about this. So I'm going to talk about a spoiler here. So if you've not read this, then definitely skip over it. But what we learn is that Poet actually has a son who has a mental disability. When Poet was 17 years old, slept with a girl, got her pregnant, and she dropped the baby off. And Poet's been raising him, and he's keeping his son Niku hidden because if people learn about him, they'll take Niku away from him and do something with him that's cruel. So Poet knows that this is wrong, that people who cannot advocate for themselves deserve to be protected. This is his main motivation for why he wormed his way into the king and queen's influence, because he wants to eventually change their ideas and their laws surrounding people, which they call born souls, the people that have these disabilities. One day, Briar accidentally finds out about Niku, and what we learn is that Autumn has a less harsh policies surrounding born souls. And Briar is actually very empathetic and loving towards Niku and all people who have disabilities. So she and Poet kind of start to collaborate together to find ways to change ideas surrounding born souls. But that doesn't get very far in this book, and I feel like that is the plot that will bleed into book 2 as they, fight for the rights of these people. So in book 1, we get that plot that's set up as well as the plot of their romance. So this is definitely a book that has a really good plot, lots of elements, and then the romance thrown on top of it that is like, I would say, equal weight to the other plot. So as for the things I liked, I actually really did like the relationship between Poet and Briar. It was a great enemies to lovers romance, and just their dislike and animosity for each other and how that slowly changed as they learn more about each other was really, really good. And Poet learns that Briar, isn't stuck up, that she has a lot to her, and he starts to love her for the real Briar. Same thing with Briar learning about Poet. She learns his secrets and learns that he's not just the facade that he puts on as the court jester. So it's almost like a Pride and Prejudice type trope too. They're judging each other based on first appearances rather than the real them. I thought that Natalie Jaster's prose was really, really pretty. It's definitely flowery, but not to a point where it took away from the story. I read a couple of reviews where people were saying they found her writing confusing. I personally didn't, but I felt like her writing was absolutely beautiful and kind of fit the Kingdom of Spring setting that we were reading about. I've never read a book, especially a fantasy book, that surrounded people who have mental handicaps. So I found that really interesting and a great kind of plot to supplement the romance. As for the things I didn't like so much, I felt like Poet was way too perfect. So he was absolutely gorgeous. He had a way with words. He was an acrobat. He was perfectly physically fit. And then there was a scene where he gets in a fight with all of these soldiers and basically wipes out all of these soldiers that are coming at him. Like, he's just too perfect. I could accept everything else, but when we got to that scene where he literally beat down like 6 grown men in armor coming at him with weapons, I was like, no, no, no. Now it's unbelievable. No, no. So I just felt like he was way too perfect, and the author really needed to give him more flaws, or at least not come across as a superhero with superhuman abilities. I also found this book a bit too long-winded. I feel like it could have gone with a good dose of editing. So, like I said, this is a spicy romance. There are a lot of sexual encounters between Poet and Briar, and they were way too long. The first scene that they ever had where they kissed and went through this makeout session, I think was like 4 or 5 pages long. I don't need to read 5 pages describing them kissing. Like, it was way too much. And then there was this sex scene towards the end of the book. I'm not joking you. 2 chapters. 2 chapters. I don't need that. It's too much. It's too much. I will say, however, that her use of vocabulary in describing spicy scenes was very interesting, very well done. A lot of words I would not have thought to use when describing those type of scenarios. All in all, I really liked Trick. I was pleasantly surprised by the plot, by the characters, by the awesome writing style, and I will definitely be continuing the series, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, you guys, let me know in the comments if you read this book and what you thought of it, or if you have read a similar book that you can recommend to me, and I will see y'all in another video soon. Goodbye!